podcast of Heal Without Harm. My name is Dr. Clayton Dir, physical therapist, also known as the Doc Dir. Today we have a special guest. Her name is Jenny Helms, and the topic will be mental health. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, also the owner and founder of Soma, Kansas's largest group practice. She's also an advocate for thriving beyond trauma and helping evolve and sculpt the landscape of Wichita's healthcare to be much, much better. Jenny, welcome.
Hi, it's good to be here, Clayton. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm kind of curious where we'll end up going with all the conversation, because I know when it comes to mental health, there's so many different areas. I know for me personally, in the last 4 or 5 years, I've kind of self-diagnosed with ADHD, embraced that, went to the doctor and was like, hey, I think I have this. He's like, cool, here's the test. And I'm kind of curious your take on this, so we'll get into it. And he's like, yep, you have it. Here's a prescription. And I was like, I'd rather not take pills. I think I just wanted validation that I am the way I am. So I know we'll get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
I definitely want to talk about how physical exercise plays into anything mental health wise.
Yeah.
Because I know when I've communicated with people who go to the gym, they show up to look better, feel better, but then they stick around because they want to be as happy.
Yeah.
If they weren't continuing to show up.
For sure.
And then I do want to talk a little bit about Soma and how someone of your age, even though like you and I are pretty much the same age, already has 6 different clinics and is running this cool business because the entrepreneur in me just wants to learn more.
For sure.
That.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about it.
So let's start with Soma actually, and kind of the path from like college, being a counselor, and then all of a sudden running 6 clinics. Where did Soma come from? How'd you start it, and how'd you get it to where it is now?
Wow, so many questions, but I'm excited to dig into that. I want to give kind of a brief overview because I love that you're like, hey, what's the origin into where you are now? And to share that it was not a direct pathway by any means. I actually went to the same grad program 2 different times in 2 different programs. So yeah, so I want to just like share, like I wasn't like, hey, I'm going to do this thing and it's going to be awesome. Like there was a lot of veering along that path. And so anyway, long story short, I went to the undergrad at University of Georgia, got my bachelor's in science and psychology. So I did know that I wanted to be in the mental health field. And I didn't even know marriage and family therapy was a thing, a master's degree. I always thought that you just go get your psychology degree, you become a psychologist. That's the path, because the therapist that really changed my life, she was a psychologist. So again, kind of a learning curve of all of the different designations in the health field. There are so many. I do not expect anybody listening, even sometimes people in the field, don't even know all of the what I call LMNOPs of mental health.
Yeah, like all the different letters or styles or certifications.
Yes, and training programs. And so I was lucky enough to meet some folks in my undergrad and work out of the graduate clinic as an intern at UGA. They had only the doctorate portion of the MFT program. They didn't have the master's level, unless I probably actually would have stuck around in Georgia. So they were like, go get your master's and come back. And that was like, okay, I'm going to go do that. And so I applied to these programs, made it into Colorado State University, started their program, had a really tough year personally. And in my family, we had some things happen too. My mom got really sick. And I had like one of those, like, I call it like a quarter life crisis and also like just a bout of my own depression and struggles where I was like, do I really even want to be in this field? Or was it the fact that I had an eating disorder in high school. That's what brought me to finding the therapist that I really felt changed my life. Prior to that, I was in therapy, but I did not think therapists were smart. I did not connect with any of the therapists that I had seen prior. And that was really mostly about me. I was an angsty young person, teenager that just didn't connect with anybody until I found the one that I found when I was 15.
How many providers did you have to go to find a good one for you personally?
Yeah, so that there were 3 that I saw before I saw the 4th one, which was the one I found at 15 that I really connected with.
Gotcha. The reason I want to interject and ask is because for me personally, with the clients that I work with, and even friends and family members, when they're trying to find somebody, whether it's somebody for their knee pain, somebody like a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, or anybody else, generally if they try one, they're like, there's no good ones.
Right. And it's like, this doesn't work.
Yeah. And then some of the people who we work with here, when it's like, we are the second opinion. Like, thank God I went to someone else. And it's like, here you are, you having to go to 4. We have some people who have went to 10 different providers before they found us, one at 18. And I just can't imagine what that's like, because if you feel like each one's, quote, a failure, or it didn't work, or like nobody can help me because nobody understands me,
right,
that's really challenging. So I just wanted to put that quick on, like, how many did you get to? Because it took 4 before you found someone that you connected with.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, pick back up from there, but I just want to make a point on that.
Yeah, I want to validate that point, and I share that with people too. Don't stop trying if your first few providers don't connect, or if it doesn't quite make sense to you yet, because it's both ways, whether it's a connection or, for me too, I don't think I understood the benefit or what I was supposed to be doing in therapy until the 4th one.
Yeah, because you have to connect with them on a human level.
Yeah.
But you also need them to be like educated and know how to help. And sometimes those don't always align, because there's some people that I know are fantastic people, and everybody loves them, but like for some reason me and them don't connect on just like a friend level or professional level. So that makes sense that you still have to carry that over into like provider-patient relationship.
Absolutely. So yeah, I love that message. Definitely want to reiterate that too. Keep trying, and don't think the field or the thing itself is not effective for you just because, especially after 1 or 2 providers. I would definitely encourage people to keep going.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so with that, it's surprising that I even wanted to go into the field, because I really genuinely thought therapists were really dumb, to be honest, outside of the fact that they got people to pay them money to just talk to them.
Yeah.
So that's what I used to think when I was a teenager. I was like, wow, these people have really figured out how to just make money by sitting there and asking you questions and just basically having coffee with you all day.
I feel like you visualize them as like a lot of times chiropractors in our world of like physical stuff is known as like the quacks, and I feel like you perceived talk therapists as quacks in a way.
Yes.
As well. Like, just keep coming back. We'll just keep talking. Like, no big deal.
Yeah, I was like, sweet way to make money, but not effective. So anyway, the fact that I'm in this field is kind of surprising to me if you had asked my teenage self. So, but yes, I have this like quarter life crisis / bout of depression, and I dropped out of grad school from Colorado. I left the program, and they were just like, "What are you doing?" Like, stay. Like, they were really encouraging me to stay, trying to help me with that, and that wasn't where I was at in that point in my life. So I dropped out. Had this quarter life crisis, was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I also have a passion for music, so that's something people don't always know about me. So I was kind of like dabbling a little bit into that. And I was dating a guy whose company was acquired by Koch Industries. So I was in Denver at the time, and his company moved to Wichita. So that's kind of full circle how I ended up in Wichita.
Where are you from initially?
Georgia, Atlanta,
gotcha.
Georgia. Yep.
Okay. I just assume everybody that lives here is from here.
Yeah.
And because like, why would you move here in the first place?
Why would anybody?
But then anybody who lives here for any stint, they're like, I kind of like it here. I'm going to stick around. That's generally the trend.
That's my story too, because when I came here, I had a horrible attitude. I was like, what's my 2 to 3 year game plan to get out of here? Like, literally, I came in very like real about that with people. Terrible attitude. And of course, it sucked me in because I'm here 11 plus years later. So I decided to move here with him, and we dated for 2 years, and it was a good relationship for the most part. I mean, obviously it didn't end up working out. I'm with my now husband, but I do have gratitude for him bringing me here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
To appreciate, what came of it.
Yeah, and the process with that, because I moved here, and of course, as life would have it, I got a job at the psychiatric hospital, and I was like, oh, of course, here I am back in mental health, and I love it, and met some people that were a part of Friends program, the MFT program at Wichita. Yep, Friends University. And I actually ended up working with them, for them as a coach, as doing administrative tasks out of real life counseling.
Okay.
And they encouraged me to apply to the program. I did my master's, the second version of it, right? Round 2, and actually completed it. And then got into the field, and about 2 years into it, I was planning to partner with the folks at Real Life Counseling to create Soma, actually. And we'd been talking about it for a minute. Towards the end, different circumstances popped up for them, and they both ended up saying, "Yep, we're not gonna do this." And I remember, it was at the time, and also like I want to give them credit and grace that we all, when we're making decisions and partnerships, it's just sometimes life unfolds. And I was not originally planning to start Soma on my own by any means. I was not that brave at all in the beginning. So I like to share that with people because I think people thought like I had this plan and I was so confident. No, like when the last person said, "Hey, I can't do this." I had one of those like dark nights of the soul where I cried on my couch for like literally hours and just was like, "Can I do this?" I was scared. I wasn't sure. I had all these doubts. And there was almost like this inner voice that came in and was like, just give yourself a year. Just give yourself a year. You have all these plans. You're already excited.
Like, do
I'd
it for
already
a year?
literally picked out the place that we were going to open Soma out of and rent that space. And it just said, try it for a year. And
like,
then
try
evaluate.
starting it up and doing it for a year?
Yeah. And then evaluate after the year, like how you feel, personally, energetically, where the business is at, all those different pieces. And so I did. And that year was really tough and really growing. And I fell in love with the process. So
Cool.
I'm so glad for whatever reason I had that little inner wisdom of like, hey, try it for a year. Because after a year, we were out of the black. I made a very, very impressive $700. I like to share that with people too, because I think people are like, oh, like, like you just came into this and da-da-da. No,
I know.
I worked my butt off. I was both doing therapy and building Soma.
Yeah, which is, it's kind of like, I remember the statement of like, sometimes, like if you're good at baking, you shouldn't become a baker necessarily, right? Like, just because you're good at doing a thing doesn't mean you should start a business around it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter whether it's a bakery, a counseling company, a PT clinic, a car selling business. Like, at the end of the day, you're still running a business. It's just, what are you selling and what are you profiting on and all that kind of things. But nobody generally goes to school for like starting a business on things like this, right? You went to school to become a counselor and then you learned business along the way.
Right.
And so those are two very different jobs though, right?
Yes.
It's like you could be a great counselor but have no idea how to run a business. And so some people need to partner with a business person or figure it out along the way. So I do acknowledge from the outside looking in, consuming a lot of content, but then also witnessing what Courtney's done here and how I've helped kind of like build it up. It's not easy. It's a lot of stuff in the background that the patients that you work with do not see.
Right.
But if you don't get it done, then people can't be helped.
Right. It's two different roles.
Very much so. You have to like switch hats, right? You have to take one hat off and put the other one on.
And I also share with people, you could have the I believe that a lot of people in these fields, it's not a competency issue. It's not that they don't have the knowledge or the skills. Like, you also have to enjoy it.
Oh, 100%.
You also have to because again, I think there are a lot of people in our field and probably like yours where it's like they just love doing the work and like growing because there's so much. I mean, just as a therapist, every year things change. There's so much you can learn and so many ways you can grow. So doing that work is incredible. It's already growing itself. Like, the field is constantly changing. And then you're adding on this additional role that do you actually enjoy those parts? Do you want to do those parts? You know what I mean? Like, that's what I asked the questions of, because a lot of folks that are, that was part of the reason too of how do I create this space for therapists and providers and medication managers to thrive, anybody who's in that psychiatric field, and that they could do what they love, that they could go in and really have the time of the day applied to the things they love doing, they're passionate about, they're excited about, and then they could leave and guess what? They don't have to worry about anything else. And that's the thing that I think I've heard a lot of folks and a lot of people have shared, like, that's the best part of their role with us is they have the flexibility. They're independent contractors. They do their role and we take on the business and administrative tasks.
They can leave work at work. Truly.
Yes.
I can attest to that here. My brain never shuts off. So I always tell people I'm like an entrepreneur where I feel like I can run like my portion. I don't own the business, own part of the business or anything. I'm still just an employee, but I can run everything as if it's my business. But at the end of the day, my check still comes in and I can leave work at work.
Yep.
And if something breaks here, that's Courtney's responsibility, not mine.
Yep.
So it's this like beautiful relationship there. And so I can see the work that he has to put in, the work that I can optionally put in if I wanted to help really like contribute there, but it's not needed.
Yeah.
And so then I can really witness both sides. Cause like Allison, one of the PTs here, she loves to come in and work and then leave and go home. And she, in my eyes, doesn't desire to like own part of the business one day, move up. She's just like, I just want to come work, go home.
Yeah.
And I envy that a little bit because like I'm constantly wanting to do that back end thing. But again, it fuels me. If she was forced into it, it would drain her.
Right.
And I think that's kind of what you're getting at right here, right? Like if it's going to drain you, then it's not for you. Find a business or find a company who can provide, like you're doing, provide all the business aspect where you can show up, crush it at your portion of the job, go home and like leave it at work.
Yeah.
Like there's so much happiness to be had
Yes.
there when you don't have to have those extra responsibilities, especially if they drain you.
For sure. Like, a big know yourself kind of piece. And also like, it's totally fine. I think business or like having your own business or doing the business parts sounds a lot more glamorous than it really is.
Mm-hmm. They make it like social media stuff make it sound sexy. And it is when you're like 15 years in, you quote unquote have it all figured out. And like, you know, things are really rolling. But the people that I hear the most from, it's like, dude, the first 3 years we profited $9,000.
Yeah.
Among like all 3 years added up.
Right.
You know, and it's like most of them, I've witnessed the true success stories just like never stopped.
Yeah.
And like you said, it takes 1, 2, maybe 3 years to get out of the red and actually get into the profiting type of things. And it's just like, just keep your head down and keep going.
Well, and it also depends, you know, I would add to that if you want to really, because for me, I really pivoted into a leadership and business role.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer really doing the clinical side of things. So I think you have to ask yourself, do I want to transition into that role as well as you grow? Because inevitably, unless you are just going to stress yourself out with all the different things you're doing, or I'll speak for myself. I was doing way too much before the 3 years ago that I said I can no longer take on clients, essentially. And that was important for the business too. It was important for all the therapists and the med providers that I worked for that I did that. Like it was super important that I gave up that role.
Yeah. So
I think for folks that are, let me put it this way, for folks that are in the role that they want to do therapy and their own private practice, it's funny, I've actually done a lot of the calculations most of the time, and not always, like there's certain workarounds for sure, but we tried to make it really to where like the way that we pair independent contractors, they make pretty much the same, if not more, working for us, just because we have shared overhead. So when you actually put the math into it, because if you go out on your own, you have to get all these things on your own and all these additional pieces and your time. Like I think people don't account for their time that they spend. They just think about like the cost of like overhead and not themselves.
When you have things like a side hustle, there's like little to no overhead, right? Where it's like, I'll just see you. I'll just see you at my house, or I'll see you here. But if you want to actually start that business, it's like, welcome to a lot of overhead. A lot of overhead and a lot of your time. Like instead of, and also your hourly, you doing admin work. So like if you just think about the energy exchange, it's way less money than you make as the clinician that with all the specialized training and skills that you have. So anyway, long story short, I think sometimes people don't have like the right people around them to really fully explain that. And so I've heard those stories as well. Absolutely. Well, let's get into some mental health stuff. Yeah. One thing that you said earlier was you've had your own bouts of like eating disorder, depression, and things like that. Yeah. And it reminds me of a quote that I heard many, many years ago that I really like and I think will resonate with you. And I may be butchering the each specific word, but it says, "We are best equipped to help those who we once were." And so if you've been there before, you can resonate with that person much deeper than anyone else. And so if you've had an eating disorder, overcame it, learned from it, and have now like conquered it and probably still battle with it at times, because I know some of these things don't completely go away. Then when you have to go back and help that person, you can be like, hey, I was there once. Here's what I did, or here's what I tried and it didn't work. Here's what I tried, blah, blah, blah. And you can resonate with them to where like I personally couldn't because I haven't been there. Even if I have all this like education, I've still never lived that. And so that's why I like that so much, is because of the journey that you went on, you can look back and be like, oh, I remember when I was there. I'm on step 15. You're on step 4. Let me help you with the next one. Yeah. Ultimately. So I think that's really cool. And moving into what are some of I know because your practice is rather large, I'm sure you guys specialize or have specialists in multiple different areas. But what are some of the ones that you focused on that you really had success with or really enjoyed and got energy from helping people? What are some of those categories of like diagnoses that you would work with? For me personally? Yes, you personally. Okay, me personally, I worked with eating disorders. Okay. And I did want to briefly share, I agree mostly with the quote you said. Okay. And I'm going to add that I do believe that those that have not been there can still help people. I would agree. I think sometimes it's also just like something about our egos when we come into it. Because I was that person too. When I went into like treatment for eating disorder, if I was working with somebody that never had one, I was like,
how can you relate to me? You don't know me. You've never walked this path. Like, I think I had my own stuff that was the blockage. And so sometimes it is like, hey, it is helpful to have somebody who's like, yeah, I've walked that. And then for some reason that did help my ego and my defenses come down. So I do believe in the power of that too. So let me be very clear. That's very powerful. And I think if someone's able to work through that defense and ego in a different way with someone, they can work with someone and be like, hey, I've never had that. And I think I can still give some perspective. I can still...
Yeah, because I've worked with people who have like significant pain, and I'll even tell them, like, I have some people who have like, back pain for 14 years. And I'm like, listen, I've never had back pain for 14 years. However, I've helped numerous, like tens, if not hundreds of people in your situation.
Yeah.
So I know the different paths, and I've seen a lot of different patterns. Yeah. And so I know what to expect each step along the way. Yeah. And so from the provider perspective, that's how I've tried to like bring down those defenses, because I'm 100% with you.
Yeah.
When you're on that side of it, you question how much this person's really going to be able to help you, especially if you have a path behind you of like, listen, these other two providers are going to help me. Why do you think you can? Especially because you've never been here.
Yeah.
So trying to diffuse that is challenging. But what I've really learned is, as a provider, if you can diffuse that with them, I mean, you've got them locked in.
For
like,
sure.
You gain like 10 times the amount of like buy-in, which is really helpful. So I do appreciate you locking in on the nuance.
Yeah, for sure.
Continuing on though.
Yeah, eating disorders.
So eating disorders and what else?
I also, so it was more like it came to me that I ended up working with a lot of folks that had sexual assault or abuse backgrounds, things like that. So healing sexual trauma and then relational trauma. I feel like those were kind of coinciding. I've now also come to term it, but I feel like a lot of folks don't understand what this means. So for those that do, great. But for those that don't, this could be an entirely different podcast itself, is complex PTSD.
Yeah, I've actually heard that more often recently.
Yeah, and if I were to put it in a nutshell, it's very subtle ways that of all the things that happened and didn't happen too. So like the things that we didn't get, that created just these moments or this lack of healthy attachment and ways of being with other people. And so there's a lot more to that. I know that sounds probably pretty woo-woo. So that ended up being kind of like the overarching theme. And then the last thing I would say is issues of over control. That's also part of my own story and history too, is I definitely I'm healing parts of myself with issues of over control. So
would you say we ever aren't working on ourselves though? Like, do we ever get to a place where like,
question.
I've got it all figured out? Like, from my perspective, no.
Yeah,
so I'm kind of curious.
I don't believe we ever arrive. Absolutely. I think that I can say for sure. And I do believe there's periods of time that it can be useful, or, I can have empathy or understanding for folks saying, I feel like right now I'm in a good enough space to where I could maybe pause on working in that area of my life, and maybe I'm putting my energy into something different. So I don't think that people have to be like really voraciously working on their mental health their entire lives forever and ever. Amen. And I think that for the most part, a lot of us could benefit from it, and the people in our lives could benefit from us working on our mental health. So I see it more of like going to the gym, and like there's periods where people have certain goals and they may want to do certain things, or that initial phase of getting fit or whatever that might look like. This may not be a perfect metaphor, but I think of it more as like a maintenance thing. And there are moments where if something comes up, yes, we have to go address that, like in physical therapy, and be intentional about it and create some consistency in our life to ensure we don't re-injure it.
For sure. There's the phrase that I've been using the last like week or two, and I know the words I'm using specifically sound almost like a test of that person's ego. And I haven't found a better set yet, but I'll tell people, listen, you've got to a place now that I would say you're good enough. And what I mean by that is they're doing everything they want in life pain-free. However, if you want to start training for a marathon, I would anticipate that Achilles tendon is going to flare back up.
Yeah.
But right now you're telling me for you to go on walks with your kids, for you to wake up and work out the way you want, Pilates or like yoga, like those aren't high demand on that area. And so for everything that you're doing in life, it's good enough. So like if you want to be done here, fantastic. We can discharge you. You're good to go. However, if you have higher aspirations, if you want to like become a jump rope queen or train for a half marathon or start doing CrossFit with a ton of box jumps, like I think you'll have to continue to do work on this area. And so, like I said, good enough sounds like you're challenging. I'm like, oh, it's good enough, but it could be better. And that's not my intentions, but letting them know that like, hey, you've crossed this threshold. And if you're satisfied with this and content,
Yeah.
then you can be done.
Yes.
But don't let yourself off the hook and just become complacent in the sense of like, oh, I just make sure I don't walk too far because I don't want to piss it off. And so it's like making sure we get them to a truly good place, and then like truly either, set it on autopilot or, keep doing certain maintenance movements. And I think I'm kind of reflecting back what you're saying, where like, hey, like I think I've got this like pretty good on my own in the mental health aspect where I can actually control this pretty well. But if I go through periods of higher stress, I may have more challenges. And then that's where we may need to either dig back in or like fall back to like, the techniques that I was taught by my counselor and things like that. And I feel like physical therapy and then psychotherapy, like, there's so many in my eyes, like mirrors or like parallels that can be pulled from it. Does that sound about right?
It does. And it also helps me because it's tough. I'm like, me being in this field, I think a lot of people might be like, of course you think, people should be working on their stuff and doing therapy and all the things.
Yeah, because you have bias.
Right. Of course I do. And I genuinely, despite that bias, really believe that it's a weird field that I don't see. Let me kind of compare it to what you're sharing. You were talking about, hey, if they go run a marathon, I think that people that are in leadership roles or they're taking on bigger roles in their life, it's funny because people think of it as the opposite. They would really benefit from therapy because the way that you do things, the way you lead, the way you communicate, your influence is trickling down to so many more people that your inner work is super important, that you are doing your own work and aware of the ways that you're impacting people and your internal stuff is impacting people. So it's kind of also based on the person, their role, what they want to take on, if they want to take on a marathon, so to speak, and how they are handling life.
Sure.
So not just injuries, but, we're not just, I think people always think I have to be in the red of mental health to get treatment, or that's when they would see a therapist. But I also believe that depending on the roles you're in, it's super important that you're doing your work and making sure that you're not projecting your stuff onto everybody to try to like simplify that.
This episode of Heal Without Harm is brought to you by Compelled Fitness, your ultimate partner in Wichita for getting into the best shape of your life. Whether you're aiming for better health, reaching athletic goals, or simply improving your fitness, Compelled Fitness offers programs and services tailored to fit your needs. Don't settle for less than your best. Visit compelled-fitness.com today and start your transformation with expert guidance and personalized fitness. At Compelled Fitness, the goal is helping you become the best version of yourself. Athletes and club teams, load up your gear with Van Gogh Transport Services. Led by local Ironman triathletes, Van Gogh safely ships your bikes, team equipment, or even bulky luggage to out-of-town events. Focus on performance, not logistics. Explore more at vangohtransport.biz. Because another statement that I've really liked, that this can be as profound as you want it to be, but I always like to take things deep, is like actions speak louder than words. And I think in a leadership perspective, that is like insanely true, because I did a leadership presentation once and I used that quote and I said, one of the biggest things that I've witnessed with Courtney, the owner here, is he will tell us to do things or ask us to do things. But if we're busy, he will go do those. And so like on a Friday, he'll come in and he'll literally like mop the whole gym, clean up the whole floor.
Yeah.
And we'll come into like a nice clean clinic. And it's like, so he's still working his butt off, even though, from the outside looking in, people may be like, oh, he doesn't treat patients anymore. It's like, no, he runs the business now.
Yeah.
And there's times where he'll come walking in and he'll see trash in the parking lot. He'll come in, throw a glove on and go pick it all up.
Yeah.
And it's not too like, because that's who he is.
Right.
Right. And so like, whether or not he's done inner workings or went to therapy or whatever, like that's who he is. And so naturally, everybody that works here wants to model that.
Right.
But if he never did it and would just walk by it, walk by the trash or like at a grocery store, walks past the cart sitting out and doesn't grab it and carry it in, we see that and then we're like, well, if he asks us to do it, why isn't he doing it? I mean, that's a natural tendency, right? Whether we're all conscious of that or not, we are conscious of, wow, he really does just pick up everything, or he does wipe it down, or he does do that. So naturally, I'm going to follow and I want to do more. And so if the leader is doing things action-wise and speaking the words, like I'm going to follow that person much more.
Yeah.
where over time, if they keep telling, but they're not doing, naturally, whether I know it or not, or the employer knows it or not, or the follower knows it or not, they're going to start building this resentment of like, would you stop telling me what to do when you're not even like contributing to this?
You're not embodying that yourself.
Yes.
And whatever role that looks like, or, whatever it is, or, yeah, exactly. And I also believe that the depth of our relationships is, again, what I've understood about relational trauma and things like that. It's the subtle things. Like, I don't think people realize their marriages could be a lot more intimate and deep. But sometimes their stuff gets in the way of that. So, and some people, like, they choose, and it's like I don't want to put a right or wrong on this. They choose to have less intimate marriages. They have very like, we keep it surface level. We don't really fight. We, blah, blah, blah. But they actually lack a lot of intimacy. And so it's also a measure of like where you want to take that in your life as well. So yeah, it's like leadership roles, your relationships themselves. It's not just about healing stuff when it's wounded or when you're struggling really deeply with your mental health. There's a lot that working with a good therapist and doing, like I say good because I'm in this field, and just like any other field, there's good and there's ineffective therapists as well, or therapists that really aren't doing their own work as well. And so that's a big thing that I advocate for is, like you said, kind of embodying that. Like, I believe in therapists that go to therapy. I go to therapy. I do a lot of therapy work, and I'm very grateful and happy to like share that and not be weird about it, because I think that that's actually what we need in leaders and what we need. And we need more of that, if that makes sense. And I'm really excited. Like, the younger generation is so much more chill about sharing that they go to therapy. And that was not when I don't know if I shared this with you, but when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I was hospitalized 2 times for quite some time. And I pretended like I would come back to school and I was like, I was just on vacation. Like, it's fine. We're just going to pretend like that didn't happen.
It was an all-inclusive resort.
All-inclusive resort at the hospital. It was so fun, guys. And everybody else played along too. And it was like, and people would just treat me like I was there the day before. And not realizing how weird that is now, looking back. Like, the only people that did, and I am grateful for my teachers. I had a couple of teachers that would like look me in the eyeball and be like, how are you doing? And then others that would just pretend like, again, nothing happened. So it was just a different time where people were like, we don't talk about this. And it's only for people that are like not okay. So there's a lot of shame there. You have to be like in the red
or like busting through the red to actually like be talked to.
Yeah.
Well, let's go into that. So eating disorders, what qualifies, what are eating disorders? Which ones, like what all is that out there? This is a horrible question.
I was about to say, well, this could be its own podcast too.
Yeah, for sure. Let's touch on it because I want people to have some like tactile things to walk away with.
So now it's funny. There's a diagnosis itself, and that's one thing. But one of the biggest factors in the eating disorder field is this idea of sick enough. Like, a lot of clients that have come to see me and several other clinicians in our community, we share this like grieving of like, they come in and they're like, I'm not sick enough, even though they definitely are. So I think sometimes the diagnosis itself can be limiting, because I see eating issues, and I want to make this like a bigger picture thing, eating issues or an addiction or a problem with something in your life as being anything in your life, and I stole this from Dr. Gabor Mate, so I want to give him credit. Anything in your life where the minute it's creating harm for you or other people in your life, you're not able to reel it in. And so when I think about a relationship with food, the ways that I was engaging with food as a teenager were really harmful to myself, and they were harmful to the people in my life, because instead of engaging with them, instead of using my brain and being able to like focus on other things in my life, it was hijacked by thoughts about controlling food or, my behaviors themselves. Like, what if I would go out and do stuff, or if I would have to, do other things beforehand. Like, my life, it wasn't my own. It was revolving around the eating disorder, not my eating behaviors revolving around me and what I want and care about deeply. So big picture, it's any ways that we've lost ourselves and we are creating harm to ourselves or other people, and we're not able to reel it in. Because I think any person can have struggles with food temporarily, or like start to realize that about themselves. And then I think there's a lot of people on the periphery that kind of struggle with food, but they're not diagnosable for an eating disorder, so they never do anything about it. And it makes me really sad to see that because they're still losing parts of themselves and their lives to food or
So
whatever
where
it
would you
is
say
they have
someone
with that.
should, I'm going to say seek treatment, but I think one big barrier for people is like, for me personally, I know that in the evening times I don't have as much control. And so if I'm eating food, I'll eat too much food.
Yeah.
Other people are like, I need to stay super skinny or stay super thin. I want to eat not that much food. And so the idea of one, acknowledging that you have challenges with that, admitting it out loud, and then where do you go? Do you Google it? Do I go straight to a counselor? Do I go to my doctor first? Like that all sounds scary to me. So if someone thinks they're having some sort of an issue and is like, maybe I should ask for help on this, like what are those next steps and how do they know how bad they are? Like, because you almost have to convince them in a way, not convince them, but they have to acknowledge that they're quote sick enough, or like there's a certain amount of problem here to cross a threshold to ask for help.
Yeah.
So like, what would you say to that person that is like, you can see them, they're clearly struggling, but they don't think they are?
I mean, that's a great question. Like, how do we help people get past their self-deception?
Yeah,
is
because
what you're asking?
You don't want to pathologize. Yeah, kind of. But you don't want to pathologize something that's not there, right? You don't want to be like, no, listen, you have a problem.
Yeah.
But you also want to be like, your life could be better if we address this. And I think that's what's hard is you want better for that person, but maybe they don't want it for themselves, or maybe they don't think it could be. Like, I mean, this whole thing is the challenge. So I'm curious.
Yeah.
We'll just skip to if someone's listening right now and they're on the fence and they're like, man, maybe I should actually like go like get this addressed.
Yeah.
Like where would you recommend they start? Like when they get done listening here, like what do they do next?
I would say, I mean, it's tough because like anything, it's going to be nuanced, but I don't see the harm in at least going to see a therapist and talking about it.
Okay.
Like to me, you're already doing the same thing and you have this like annoyance or pain in your life. Why not go at least discuss it and say, what do you think? Or even just have a space to internally process it. Sometimes it's just that, like actually giving it space, naming it, and internally processing what's happening, how it's affecting your life, and just having some sort of practice that you can cultivate self-awareness. I think most people walk around life completely unself-aware.
Agreed.
And so that's a skill that we build in therapy is how do I become more self-aware? And so that's what it's like going to the gym and like building your core muscles that impact so many other things in your back. And like, it's
almost like
it's like that self-aware.
Yeah. You ask somebody to like pick up a 40-pound dumbbell and you can just tell like you've never picked up something like this in your life.
Yep.
And I think that's what's challenging with all of it is there's no like physical, well maybe there's not like a physical test for mental uncoordination. We're just going to make up a term there.
Yeah.
Okay. So the person's like, okay, I'm going to do something about this. What should they type into the Googles or what should they do from there? Should they ask friends? Should they type in Google therapist eating disorder?
I would Google a local therapist and start there. And typically from there, and like we talked about earlier, that may not be the best therapist. That may have just, they might just have amazing SEO or whatever it is, or just they might specialize in other things. So there's not that like fit and that passion for your specific concerns. So to just start there though, because typically, I mean, in our field too, we are ethically, and I would say most folks are just, they want to do this. If they're not a good fit, they're going to try to find a good fit for you.
Yeah.
And I know at Soma too, it's like if somebody's like, oh, I don't really like my therapist, we're happy to reconnect them. And sometimes too, it's like if we don't have a therapist that's available, because that's more of the issue. We have a ton of therapists that are, they specialize in all the things, and typically we can fit them in. But if it's super specialized, we may end up having to refer out, and we do that because like you've called, you've already, that's already a hard thing to do for most folks. We want to make sure you at least start somewhere and start that process. So yeah, give them hope.
For sure.
Yeah.
Another one that I don't know if you've worked with is kind of the connection. I know when we talked a long time ago in the past, you brought up a book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah.
And I know you also mentioned some people feel like they have to be in the red before they seek treatment, which that somewhat comes from that book. Am I correct?
Oh, I didn't get it from that book.
You didn't? Okay.
No, there's like there's an actual if you look up the mental health wellness like levels, there is some generic, and I'm not saying that this is the best tool, but it talks about people being in the green and the yellow and the orange and the red. And they say at any given time, only 15% of the population is in the green. And I share that because I think most people think it's the opposite. Like,
Well, that's what we
we're
see,
all
right?
great.
Yeah.
And like, only 15% of people need to go to therapy, and it's therapy's for them. And it's like such an interesting, it's just, even that alone shows how much I think we all kind of deceive ourselves. Yeah.
So coming back to the kind of mind muscle or mind physical body pain connection,
Mm-hmm.
in our practice, we see a lot of people in physical pain, tendonitis, achy joints, whatever. But I've seen there's some people who don't get better in the first month or so.
Yeah.
And as we start rolling out physiological pain, so like there's actually inflammation in this area, or, this joint is swollen, or they're weak in this area where they can't do these, like a certain number of calf raises, like they seem to pass all of our objective testing, yet they still have pain.
Yeah.
And they've maybe seen multiple providers and they still have pain. And I've seen cases, one was elbow, one was like upper back, and another one was low back. And talking to different people, I always knew that pain is an extremely complex thing. Like there's some flowcharts and like images out there that have pain in the middle, and they say, here's all the things that can affect pain. And there's like a million of them. And I was talking to my doctor, and he recommended a book called Healing Back Pain. And the gentleman who wrote it is Dr. John Sorno. And he boiled everything down to, in his words, are tension myositis syndrome. So the idea is you develop tension in certain muscles, which therefore create pain, inflammation, and irritation, secondary to traumas that you've had in life. First of all, have you heard of this in any capacity?
I haven't heard it called that until you told me about it. But I've heard about this, definitely this phenomenon, and seen / yes, I believe in the body and like storing trauma in different ways, specifically with chronic pain.
So when these people, when they read this book, they said like, wow, this really resonates with me. And then I'll actually see their pain greatly reduced within a week or two. And I'm not saying it's like this perfect end all.
Right.
But when I can slow play it enough where it's like, hey, I think like there's a psychological stress aspect to this. I'm not sure if this is perfectly you, but I'd like you to go look into this book, give it a read. I think it's like 150 pages. So it's on the shorter end. And then they can kind of go self-discover and see if it fits them. We end up getting really good results with those people. And so I'm curious, do you have any background in working with clients who have physical pain? And then do you generally see, as they kind of get things mentally sorted out with whatever they've got going on, that their physical pain may dissipate away? Or what tactics could they potentially use in the counseling and therapist world that may alter their physical pain?
So I don't specifically specialize in chronic pain or chronic illness, and I do work with trauma. Because you work with trauma, and that's actually our vision for Soma itself is helping Wichita thrive beyond trauma. So a lot of our clinicians specialize in trauma. That's their focus. That's how they train, which trauma can be at the root of a lot of different things, including things like chronic pain, illness, all of those different pieces. I really admire, and I've already mentioned him, Dr. Gabor Mate's work that he's done with trauma, and he is a doctor. That is his background, and he actually used to work with lots of cancer patients. And he's done wild research and pulled together other research that they're showing more and more that, and again, this is not trying to blame people for their health things. It's really just trying to elucidate how much our bodies and our mind and how we engage with the world is connected to what happens to our bodies, to physical pain, to things like even cancer. So he's done amazing research. He has a huge book. So you said a small book. I love that because he has this huge book called The Myth of Normal, where he goes into detail about all of that. And he wrote it with his son. It's a really cool. Anyway, long story short, if someone is wanting to delve into that more, I'd highly recommend that, or at least just listening to some of the YouTube or podcast clips with Dr. Gabor Mate, because he specifically talks about how childhood trauma and experiences impact what they see later in life with illness and disease and pain in the body.
Well, the way I've looked at it is, for example, my wife, she's had a couple bouts of anxiety, and when she does, she'll have a pain in like between her shoulder blade and spine. So like the upper mid back area. And I remember one point in time, she asked like, "So you're just saying it's all in my head?" And I was like, "In no way am I saying that." But when you go under psychological stress, and I would love for you to correct anything that you feel like I'm slightly off on, I appreciate you be willing to do that. But when you have a psychological stressor, your body's going to respond in some certain way.
Yes.
And I think when I used to think that, well, like the body stores trauma, I feel like I would picture it as like body's like trauma, go away from my brain, and then it like throws it down to your hip.
Right.
And I don't think that's, I know that's not accurate. And as I've seen the way like the muscles respond, it's almost like, if I were to like throw a ball at your face, you would quickly like pull away and try to move your head and like close your eyes, right? And so it's like that's your body's natural response to a ball coming at your face. So I think some people have certain physical postures they may sit in, or certain things that happen that they may not notice when stress is upon them. So they feel like they're going to lose their job. They have an important phone call coming up. They have a death of a family member, and they start to like tense up in a certain way. And like, I don't know if this actually takes place from a visually posture perspective, but I think my wife in particular, that muscle would spasm up. And when I get down to the point with some of these people who I think is falling into that bucket, it's like you cannot out strengthen that muscle. This is no longer a weakness issue, right? It's not a tendonitis issue that like, oh, if we just go strengthen that muscle, this will not come back.
Right.
It's we need to peel back the layers and talk about some different stressors, or like give you some tactics to navigate this so that when a stressful event takes place, you don't have physical pain. Or if that physical pain comes on, here's what you can do about it to mitigate it or decrease it. And I think that's what it comes down to in this gentleman's book of the tension myositis is essentially the psychological stress leads to a tension in that muscle because that's what your body has learned to do. Probably tracing back, like you said, to a trauma back at 12 years old.
Yeah.
Or like all of these little traumas that like, oh, every time dad comes home, shit hits the fan and there's anger. And so you like do certain things.
Right.
And then at 29, it's like your body's like, dude, I've had enough. You're going to have
this
back
for
pain
years.
now. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like you didn't, like no one thing was done wrong. It's like you had this learned thing that you've continued to like hack away at, and then it's developed into this. And so I really like that book because people are like, wow, like, they actually get me. The last guy I gave it to, he's like, did they write this book specifically about me? Because he said it comes on at 40. It's with these type of people with this type of background. He's like, the dude literally like wrote out my childhood. And I was like, interesting. This is quite helpful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was excited to hear your kind of take on it. Do you have any comments in specific on kind of that little path there?
Yeah. I would say mostly that I want to reiterate and validate that all makes sense to me from the mental health and trauma lens, that when we're little, our bodies, like if we have a certain interaction with our parents, especially if or caregivers or people in our lives, and it's frequent enough and we don't know how to like emotionally process, release, our body's going to be stressed out. It's going to have those different postures, but also biochemically, we are going to release chemicals.
I think that's a big one that's getting more known about.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot. So I think when people think of mental health, it's not just what's going on here. And like, I'm waving my hands in between us if you're listening. Like the relational aspect, or even just like inside your brain, it's the chemicals being released within your body and how that impacts all these other systems over time. Actually, the gut, I don't know, you didn't talk about this piece, but maybe you already know this. The gut has more neuroreceptors than the brain. And a lot of people don't realize that. So the idea that our brain isn't just in our head, it's throughout our entire body. There's a lot of different pieces. When we talk about the brain, it's a very complex organism in our body. And so mental health is a body experience. It's how our bodies end up like in those postures as a response to stress or trauma, or just not knowing how to emotionally offload or process things. I just want to validate that as humans, almost all of us do not learn how to emotion regulate or co-regulate or have those emotion skills. So when we are trying to cope in our especially little people brains, like think about all the different skills and ways you try to survive from a little person brain. It's not from your adult brain. When your adult brain looks back, it's like, why did my little brain do that? It's like, well, you literally didn't have capacity.
No, not at all.
And so that's where you develop that habit or that default. And that got ingrained then. It got encoded then. And so as an adult, you don't realize you're still doing it.
You're
That's
still
what's
using that old
happening.
pathway that was not created optimally.
Right. And so it can be stored as physical pain because, again, people don't have that. Like, some people can't connect, and that's okay too. I struggle with connecting with my body as well. And that's, hello, eating disorder. But like, there's a lot of layers to that still that I'm still working on and healing. And that's been a really cool process and hard and scary. But, and vice versa. Some people, it's like they store a lot in their body, but they don't know how to connect it to what's going on in their lives.
Yeah.
Or even when you feel what we call like an emotional flashback, which is when it's almost like you feel like something overtakes your body and all of a sudden like you're lashing out or you're doing something harmful to yourself, or it's like those moments of stress where people are like, I just can't, It's like that's also part of those biochemicals that are being released.
Because your body sees a previous threat or something going on in your life right now is similar to a threat that you had back then. And your body's like, oh shit, the last time this happened, all these other things happened. And then you kind of get overtaken.
Yeah.
Which I can speak to that specifically. My daughters have both had like some health challenges. And there's certain things that have taken place where it's just like you said, this overwhelming emotion that comes over you and you're like, oh shit. And it's really, really challenging to deal with those things. And I think if you've never had it before, it's really hard to relate. Because I feel like for me personally, I haven't had a ton of challenges in life that have been very significant. So when they hit me now, I'm like, wow, I really understand what like all these people were going through. Because like now I felt what they feel or I feel what they have felt. That's what I meant to say. And so...
Or you're at least connecting the dots.
Yes, yeah. And I think this is a slightly humorous one, but when I did my half marathon, I had a ton of nerves because I was doing something at like what I felt like a high performance level that I was never good at, running distance. And about a mile and a half in, my entire gut like just locked up on me. I had to run 3 more miles before I could make it to a porta potty. And my gut was like very unhappy with me. And I wanted to attest it to like maybe my nutrition was off, maybe this, but I realized like I was scared shitless, quite literally, of like running that race. And I still performed like I wanted to before and after said bathroom break. But it was a psychological stressor that led to an incredibly physical like
experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when like I wanted to call this podcast when we were trying to figure out the name, I was about to call it The Root Cause because I feel like the goal is always to get down to the root cause. And what I've learned by talking to a lot of patients, treating a lot of patients, talking to people like yourself, is you start seeing these connections of like, oh, this person has had irritable bowel syndrome their whole life. It's like, is it really irritable bowel syndrome or is it like a psychological stressor that your body consistently like fails at doing its job appropriately or optimally in the gut?
Right.
And then you start seeing like, well, that person also has this, this, and this. And it kind of boils back to some sort of pathway that was developed back in childhood that we need to kind of go clean up or fix up or talk through or like improve a little bit. And then suddenly their irritable bowel syndrome disappears.
Right.
And so I don't know what I want to be taken from all of that. But I think when you can look at the whole body, like you said, I know you're here for counseling over this eating disorder. But like, give me all your background. Like, give me everything. Because like you said, connecting the dots, you start seeing like, hold on, I think your irritable bowel syndrome may be a little bit related to this like shoulder pain that you say only comes on when your dad yells at you. And then this other thing over here. And you're like, I think these all trace back to one thing. If we can fix that or work on that or improve that, you may notice these outlier symptoms that you never thought were related start to actually like clear up or disappear or go longer before a flare up.
Yes. And I think like that's the root where it's like if you want long-term sustainable change, that's really important. And I want to value like your side too. The physical side is also important in the sense of like, I think that you still need to do the physical work because the damage is done physically too. So I want to validate the physical part because I think sometimes people come in, they're like, you're just telling me I have to work on my childhood and you're not validating that I have these like real legitimate symptoms. I'm like, no, you have the legitimate symptoms. So we're going to have to go through both angles to create healing because the physical damage is there too, or like the need to heal that or have ways of getting out of that physically too. And if we want to like change the patterning that created it, like the root cause, that going back to that, we'll also have to do these other
Yeah.
pieces. So I feel like that's what you're seeing so
Yeah.
much in your practice, because you're like, wow, we could do this physical stuff all day, but the cycle continues for a lot of people if
And
it's
we can
not
help
just like an
mitigate the
acute.
symptoms, but we're not going to solve the problem
Yeah.
unless
Yeah.
we go work on those things.
Yes.
I ultimately visualize just like building a business. Yes, you can be good at being a counselor or a therapist, but can you actually build a system in the background to keep the patients coming in, to keep them sticking around, to like build a business for the next person? At the end of the day, you took your business from infancy, right? Like non-existing, to like you can make it run for yourself. Then can you bring it on for others? And overall, you had to build a system along the way. The way I look at it is when we're born, we have no systems. Our brain has like billions, if not trillions, of like neurons firing because it's trying to figure out what systems work. Let's build these systems, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's chemically, mentally, emotionally, physically, like, oh, what happens when I like turn this muscle on? Oh, that bends my elbow. Okay, well, if I want to, pick up that cup and bring it to my mouth, I need to fire this muscle, and it's learning that system. What happens when my mom leaves? Well, I'm really scared because she's gone, but oh, wow, she came back. Okay, so when she leaves, she generally comes back. So you learn like, okay, got it. So when she leaves for work, she comes home, it's okay, I don't need to be scared. When this happens, these things follow. So you start to learn all those systems. And at the end of the day, I think when you have faultiness in those systems, stuff breaks down, whether it's like mental health and you feel drained, whether relationships can't build because the system that you built, through childhood is faulty. So then when you get into a relationship in the future, it doesn't run like you want it to, and you can't figure that out. And then all of that still piles up to, like you said, like cancer type diagnoses, or these other like what feels like just bad luck. Like, oh, I was just diagnosed with cancer, it's bad luck. It's like, or maybe a system that you had in your body that was developed back in childhood was suboptimal, and it was repeatedly used over and over again suboptimally. And we know that in general, our body's constantly producing cells, and those cells are only as good as the ones that came before it generally, unless you do something to alter that. And so I think sometimes in certain areas of the body, those systems keep reproducing over and over again, but a little bit less good than before. And then eventually one of those systems goes haywire. That turns into a cancer cell. That cancer cell does a really good job of reproducing. And then now you have cancer secondary to 40 years ago, you had this trauma that you've just ignored and not addressed.
Right.
Ultimately. I mean, is that kind of like what you were mentioning on some of the research that was done by that gentleman?
Yeah. I mean, big picture, yes. I know there's a lot of nuance in that, or even just the ways that like the behaviors we engage with will contribute to that later on illness and not being well. Like think about what we are putting into our bodies or whether we work out and things like that, that like those behaviors themselves are influenced by where we're at and certain defaults in our trauma wiring system. So there's all those pieces coming together. But yes, I think you did a really good big picture overview of that.
Okay. So the last thing I want to kind of talk about is one thing I've noticed with you, a gentleman I met with yesterday, and some other people that I've had on, is we all have this resounding, we saw a problem in the medical system and we want to do something about it, fix it. You mentioned you should go to a good counselor or a good therapist. And you're like, I want to qualify good because there's some that are suboptimal or ineffective, which I really like that word. I've noticed the same thing with PT. Sometimes an ineffective physical therapist gets somebody to completely write off physical therapy as a whole. And I'm like, gosh dang it, I get it because I've worked under, and then also been to ineffective therapists. So I see your frustrations. And I'm sure the same thing is there in the psychotherapy world as well, along any profession. So I've noticed that as a resounding theme of most of the people that all the people I've had on this podcast in particular. And so what frustrations or flaws did you see in the system that when building Soma, you wanted to make sure were fixed or were improved upon? Like what were some of those that you focused on?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways to answer this, but the things that are top of mind when you say that are things like therapists or providers in the mental health community that are not doing their own work and are lacking self-awareness. And I want to add to that, I don't think that they're intentionally not doing their own work. I think there's literally this meme that goes around in our industry that is, tell your client to do self-care and then they look like the Grim Reaper. Like it's very much just like, I'll tell you what to do. I can hold space for you. And they don't hold space for themselves. They don't do that self-awareness work. They don't do their own deep clinical work. And that reflects in how they do therapy, how they sit with people. I believe in it as like, I'm not saying it actually is a tax write-off, but it should be as part of the work that we do, really taking care of ourselves as clinicians and even psychiatric medication managers and the wounds that can happen there when they are not self-aware and they might be projecting onto a client without realizing it. And so that's one part. And I'm like, how do I insert this in? I'm just going to be honest. I wanted to share this at some point, that the openness and the ability to continue learning, and especially with the field of, so the newest thing in our field, psychedelic-assisted therapy, which is wild to a lot of people. It's very misunderstood, especially in the state of Kansas. I think we have a lot of cultural and historical things that inform that and why people have fears and biases. And I want to validate that. I get those fears. I was a person that, 5 years ago, if you had said that I would not only be somebody that has done ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, but somebody that has trained in it and creates training programs within my practice and encourages folks to do that work. And we actually have those resources at Soma as well. So getting back to how I try to incorporate this into Soma.
Because you want to put the patient first. Like, how do I best help this person? You mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Maybe that's referring them to a provider that's not within your business because you want the best for them.
Yes.
And then it's new stuff like this.
It's actually being open to it and willing to learn. Because I think a lot of therapists even are scared about what ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is or means, or the psychedelic-assisted therapies. And so I only say the big umbrella. Ketamine is what we can work with now because that's just the medicine that we have access to within our systems. And so that's a systemic change that's happening on a much bigger level. Again, a totally different conversation. And it is a game changer. It is truly, it helps people with the self-awareness deficits. It helps people with healing trauma and complex trauma because it actually creates neurogenesis in your brain and allows you to kind of, we were talking about how you originally encode things. It gives you the experience, the ability to do that work, to re-encode it with the right therapist, right? Like recreationally, if you're just doing ketamine, not the same thing. Not the same thing. You actually have to do the trauma work and re-encode it, but we have the tools and the ability to do it with this medicine now. And I'm like, this is so freaking cool. And they're seeing, I could just talk about it for like 5 minutes.
That person needs to see, feel, and experience certain things that can be assisted significantly well when ketamine is used. Right? But it's almost like visualization, manifestation type stuff where it's like, if they don't see it and believe it, then they can only get so far. And it sounds like ketamine is something that, when assisted with a therapist, can walk them down a path, and then literally physically, neurons or pathways start to develop neurogenesis, right? And so now it's okay, now we have biochemical and physical change secondary to the experience that was aided with ketamine and the therapist along that path.
Yes, with the right, what we call set and setting. So that's the importance of doing it with a therapist or in the right type of setting, or even with music that's informing the calmness, the love, there's a lot of, what they call it an ineffable experience because it's hard to put words to. So I think just to understand that it is not just, hey, recreationally doing it without also understanding that ketamine interacts with a lot of different other things. So when I think about people's recreational stories, I'm like, did you have caffeine that day? Did you do that? There's so many different pieces. But doesn't it also point out
that if you do it recreationally and if it's that strong when done right, could it also be that strong when done wrong or done poorly? Or
I don't want to say that either because it's kind of wild. I've seen people not have great, because ketamine isn't always a great experience because sometimes you are revisiting those traumas, but having a person in a setting that it's like, how do I describe it? It's like you're the observer of that experience when you're on ketamine and you're able to fully more process it and heal that wound in the moment because you also have, they say that the attachment wound gets healed if you have a really nurturing, amazing, space holding trained therapist to be there with you while you're going through that. And then all of a sudden your nervous system's like, I'm okay. And it's hard. I mean, I'm simplifying it because we have time stuff, right? But if we ever wanted to dig into this into a deeper podcast, I'd be happy to. So I guess distilling it back to your question, I really try to create ways, and it's part of our values too. The S in Soma is the self-awareness and self of the therapist. So having self-awareness and working on those skills, self-care, and the openness to how the field is changing and using some of these medicines that are really healing
For sure. Well, let's do this again and let's go into the ketamine stuff because I do think that I would like to have that conversation to make it easier for someone to literally just listen.
Yeah.
Right. There's no harm in that. And then they can maybe break down some walls and then seek out
sure.
treatment, or maybe they have a friend or loved one that they think could be greatly helped by something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it is literally life-saving.
Yeah.
It saves people that are suicidal. So I just want to like put that out there. Yeah. They've tried a bunch of other stuff. You give somebody a dose of ketamine and 80% of people they don't have suicidal thoughts within 24 hours. So I just say that and I'm so passionate because I'm like, I can't believe that we've been doing all these other things with people that are struggling with thoughts of suicide and not giving them these amazing options.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, we could do a whole podcast, but
no, I can feel your passion on those things, and it's one of those things where you mentioned earlier, and we said like, yeah, clearly you're biased, like you want them to come in. It's like, well, why do you think I'm here though? Like, right? Like, you thought not mental health, you thought counseling and therapy was like a joke as you were younger, and then you kind of saw the other side. You're like, oh shit, like this is awesome. Like there's a reason you built the business you did to try to help as many people as possible, because you can only help so many people by yourself. But you can help a significant amount when you build a company that can create a space for numerous other people to come in and help all of those. So
yes, and I was very and I was not anti-ketamine, but I like, again, 5 years ago, if you'd ever say, I had to do like months of research and trust building with my therapist to ever go there.
Yeah,
I was not like hey, let's do this. I was like, oh my gosh, like I come from this like very conservative Christian background and like all these things, and it just it wasn't like I was like, let's go, you know.
You're like, if we're gonna do this, we're gonna do it right, for sure.
And I'm gonna have all the information. So,
well, I look forward to doing that. We'll try to get it set up actually quite soon, because I have a bajillion questions on that. So
sweet.
Jenny, before you go, if someone wants to reach out to you, reach out to Soma, wants to learn more about this space, like what are some sources that they can start with when they go click in the show notes down below, or go type some stuff into Google?
Yeah, I think the best way would just to be search Soma Therapy if you're in the area, or go to somawichita.com. We're also on socials at Soma Wichita. So SOM as in monkey A Wichita. That would be the best way.
Okay. Yeah. We'll get them set up, and we'll have some of those links down in the show notes. So if you don't want to go type some stuff, you can just scroll down and tap that button. If you are liking this and you want me to have more people on, please reach out to me and send those suggestions. And if you haven't yet, help us grow by leaving us a rating and review. Jenny, thank you again for coming on today.
For sure.
And hopefully you guys listened and got a little bit more value on how to heal without harm. Thank you.